You might be surprised, or maybe you might not be surprised, by the amount of times that I have been told about, asked about AI and blindness. Can AI cure blindness? Let's talk about it. From a black background, two teal canes crossing behind a pink atom flicker on in neon light. To the right, white words stack vertically, blind over matter. The words and logo fade to black. Before we get started, I want to give my usual disclaimers. I am one person. This is my experience. I do not speak for blind people. This is my perspective, my story, and I wanted to talk a little bit about, first, the way that I grew up experiencing being blind. What are some of the things that I learned that are really important? And how does AI and kind of the modern approach to seeing blindness, experiencing blindness, but also how we are seen and experienced by others, how does all this fit together? So, for starters, I started learning Braille and using a white cane, which are two of the most influential forms of independence that I have had in my life, both by the age of about 4. Now, I was born in the late 90s, and thus I was 4 in the early 2000s or thereabouts, and I learned things in a very analog way because that is kind of the tool set we had, and I quite literally grew up alongside the internet and the progression of technology for the blind that has come in my lifetime has been truly incredible to see. And before we get to the fancy robots and all the things that are available now, I want to give you background so that you understand why my perspective is the way that it is. So, when I started to learn Braille and use a cane, the internet was in its very, very infancy, in that I remember MapQuest, okay? And it's crazy because the way that I had to learn, for instance, the layout of my elementary school was by learning the cardinal directions. And so, for those who may not know what the cardinal directions are by name, you know them as north, south, east, and west. And most people associate those directions with larger concepts. So the north side of town, the south side of the suburbs. I learned them that way. I also learned them in the context of a room. For example, in my studio room, I can still tell you where the north wall of my studio is, which is behind me. The south wall is in front of me. The east wall is to my left currently. West wall is to my right. Now, I don't say that to confuse anyone. I say that because my point of reference when I started to navigate around the world, not the world, but you know what I mean, was through cardinal directions. And I had to have a very steady mental picture of my environment. And other than cardinal directions, my second tool was my cane and its ability to read tactily the floor, stairs, grass, that sort of thing. All of the environment around me was communicated to me via a stick, okay? And that's a skill, and it's not an easy one if you're learning it for the first time. And I down the road, I'm down to do, cane education content or whatever. But again, the reason I make this point is that my initial concept of the world and my ability to get through it was all in my head and by touch. And that's also where learning Braille was a big deal, was my ability to read when I was little did not in any way exist digitally until I was in probably about 4th grade. And so, kindergarten, as you're learning to spell and all of those things, all of those skills were taught to me through my learning of Braille. Why is this relevant to AI, you might ask? Well, the world that a child is growing up in now possesses different kinds of technology than what I grew up with. And the first thing that I wanted to highlight is the way that books themselves have changed. So I want to tell you an entertaining story here. I was probably about 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there, and our family someone locked the keys in the house. And we had this tiny little basement window. And so I remember being lowered through the basement window and my feet hit a box. So I kicked, they said, okay, kick the box. And I kicked the box and it went down, and they lowered me to the next spot in the next box. Those boxes contained the Harry Potter books. And in Braille, the Harry Potter books are sort of like a print encyclopedia in that they are printed in many, many volumes, many parts. And so each Harry Potter book, I think on average, was somewhere between 10 and 12 volumes. And that is the way that I read books. I read books physically. We got mail from a Braille library in the state of Utah, and my books would show up in these big black boxes with thick Velcro on them, and I, would always forget which way the cards were flipped, and so sometimes I'd end up sending myself the books back. Whatever, it was a whole thing. And so my ability to read was in Braille. It was an analog physical thing. And I'm not saying that to say that Braille is better. I'm saying that to give you context so that when audiobooks and the digital ability to consume content in an accessible way became more available, that was new to me. And it was new to everybody. And it was really, really amazing. But it was really limiting in that not every book was available. So sometimes when I'd go to read a book for school, it just wouldn't be available in a format that was accessible to me. And that persisted all the way through college. But even then, I had to have the book. And the reason I bring this up in the context of AI, I know this is rambly, but is the fact that now you don't need the book, okay? AI cuts a lot of corners by saying, hey, you want to read Romeo and Juliet? Here, let me just give you the finer points of this here Shakespearean tale. And it's going to pull from all these different places. Some of them may be accurate, some may not. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. It's just going to throw at you, here is a summary of Romeo and Juliet. And I use that example specifically because reading, to me, was a very foundational skill in my own independence and my ability to function as a blind person in the world as an adult. And I'm not here to push an agenda or the way that blindness should or should not function. I am here to give my perspective. And reading was important for me. Now, AI, as it exists, is being presented as, for lack of a better analogy, the second coming. And what frustrates me is that there are aspects of these tools that are incredibly useful, utilitarian, and potentially very, very advantageous for blind people. Things like photo descriptions. Most sighted people don't know that describing your photos is helpful. Another video for another day. But if someone does not describe a photo, I can plug that photo into a tool like Be My AI, which is a sub-tool of Be My Eyes, which is an app we can talk about on another day. But I can plug this photo into Be My Eyes and generate a description of that photo. Now you might think, why would you want, a description of a picture of your cat? Well, I could definitely do it with a picture of a cat. I could also do it for an upcoming event in my town where they didn't, use alt text to describe the image. I could get that image described for me with AI, find out the date and time for this event, and, attend if I wish. I wouldn't have access to that photo otherwise. So AI has the potential in very select cases to be a very useful tool. AI is not, has not, and will not solve blindness. And I think there is a perception that because it's new, that because in some cases it gives us unprecedented access to the world, that somehow it negates the need for independent skills. And that's why I talked about, first, books, because reading as a foundational human being skill is still a really important thing for everybody, but especially for those in the blind and low vision community. And here's the thesis, I suppose, or the main point that I want to use when I talk about AI and blindness right now, and that is travel. Now, I'm going to talk about a situation where AI has made my travel experience a lot more accessible, but that if used without the proper knowledge could get somebody hurt quite badly. What I'm talking about here are, if you've ever seen an intersection where the crosswalk beeps and you'll hear, someone will push a button, it'll say, wait. That is called an APS signal, which I believe stands for Accessible Pedestrian System. And these are fairly common in a lot of cities, including Rochester, Minnesota, where I live. Problem being, not every intersection that's busy with complicated traffic patterns has one of these signals. So there is an app called OKO, O-K-O, and this app uses your device's camera to read the walk sign on the other side of the street and to let you know through any combination you select of auditory feedback, haptic feedback, and I believe also a spoken voice, whether or not that walk signal is on. And I'm not sure that it can count down. I don't think it can. So it just lets you know that it's on and then when it's blinking. So here's the deal. I have had years, and by years I mean about 12 to 15 years of orientation mobility, or O&M, training on not just how to use a cane, but when to use certain cane techniques, how to cross complicated intersections such that they were in my community, right? And public transportation use. And as part of these classes, I had to cross a variety of streets in a variety of situations, in a variety of weather, variety of times of day. And it was hard. It's still really hard to use proper orientation mobility when people drive like absolute morons, when people ride their Lime scooters on the sidewalk, when people walk around with unleashed pets, and when other pedestrians don't understand that I need the time and space to navigate on my own. The reason I bring this up is this app is a set of eyes and nothing more. In that, I still have to make the decision to cross the street. This app cannot cross the street for me. And if the app says that the walk sign is such that I can cross, but I hear something that doesn't sound right, if the traffic pattern isn't making sense, I'm not gonna go. But I have the discretion to make that decision. And what scares me with AI and blind people right now is that a lot of people are thinking that AI is a shortcut to navigating the world independently, and thinking that AI is going to take care of some of these thinking problems and navigation problems and accessibility problems without you having to engage with them because it's the new fancy thing. And that's why I say that AI is not going to solve blindness. It can be used as a tool, and it should be used as a tool if it's something that will help you. But in the same way that I would never recommend that anybody get all of their news from an AI, in the same way that I would not recommend that anyone do DIY plumbing with AI, in the same way that I would not recommend anybody performing social interaction based solely on the advice of AI. Blindness is not going to be solved by something that can't think for itself. Okay? It's the way it is. Thanks for watching this one. I hope this was interesting. I know we went and covered kind of a lot of ground here. It's something I've been wanting to talk about on the channel for quite a while, so thanks for checking it out. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. Do me a favor, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you soon. Peace.